Okay, this love and mental health angle is already messing with my brain. The part about unprocessed thoughts turning into anxiety and sleep problems? I get the vibes, but how do you know it's not just stress being stress? Because the claim is super specific. Depression is sadness that didn't understand itself. That line sounds like poetry and also like a mic drop in a therapy room. And the anxiety one, worry that doesn't know its own cause, okay, that feels real. Emotional conscience is such a funny way to say it. But also, revenge at 3 a.m. for all the thoughts you avoided during the day? I do that. I literally stuff feelings in my pockets like loose change. And then they rattled at 3 a.m. like, hey buddy, pay attention. The semi-dark room introspection advice. I'm imagining you negotiating with your brain. Like, sit down, what is coming up for you? Don't lie. The bigger point is we don't process experiences. They sting us in the tail. That's where the childhood stuff enters, right? Trauma as stored emotion. But I always worry, people stretch trauma to explain everything. True, but the mechanism they're pointing at is early emotions without a language to process them. Like grief at age 5, no friends, no books, no understanding of time. That's brutal. And the adult version just shows up as depression later, randomly. So the argument is, the mind protects itself with strategies that used to work. And then those strategies become a personality feature instead of a temporary tool. Like turning I learned to shut down into I'm just private, bro. Or I'm funny becomes I cannot handle seriousness without panicking. I like the framing where it's not evil, it's clever defense at the time. That compassion part matters, because otherwise you shame yourself for patterns. Still, I want to challenge the 70,000 thoughts thing. Sounds like a TikTok number. Even if the exact count is off, the claim is we have tons of fragments we don't metabolize. And the love section weaponizes that. We believe we'll find the one, and then we sulk. The soulmate myth as a trap? That is so on brand for humans. Wait, the romantic line, we didn't even need to speak, leading to catastrophic sulking? That's the most unromantic romance plot twist ever. The idea, romantic people expect mind reading, so they don't communicate and get offended anyway. It's basically, if you understood me, you'd already know, says the person silently suffering. And then you refuse to say what's wrong because saying it ruins the fantasy. This makes me think of that ding-ding warning. Not very romantic things are often good ideas. Like using words, boring, effective, terrible for our storytelling instincts. And honesty, there's a twist there too. Not total disclosure, but loving editing. I'm torn. Editing can sound like lying if people aren't careful. But the point is, ambivalence exists, so love doesn't have to expose every ugly thought instantly. I like the comparison to parenting. You don't dump your entire inner universe on a child. Also, you probably shouldn't tell a toddler your existential dread at bedtime. Now the spicy part, sex and sexlessness as a relationship diagnostic. The stat, 26% having sex less than 10 times a year, 8% none at all. That's wild. But stats aside, the proposed cause is anger stored from micro-disappointments. That actually feels plausible. Small unspoken resentment becomes a bedroom shutdown. Love becomes, I'm furious, but I don't have the vocabulary. They even propose a dinner exercise. Ask how each of you has annoyed the other. That sounds terrifying and also weirdly mature. Like, tonight, we're going to roast each other with love. I worry people will weaponize that and call it communication. True, but the key is micro-incidents, not accusation. Stay within the lane of reality. The broader theme keeps popping. The mind is not obvious to itself. Which is why therapy is a petri dish. Same patterns, different setting, clearer visibility. That sentence completion test example, men are authoritarian villains. Where does that even come from? Somewhere in the brain, a 5-year-old is like, I have evidence. Then you get the self-awareness lever, not just what happened, but what story did I assume? And the part about repeating cycles, wanting a better ending for the childhood story. That's such a hopeful framing. Repeat, but revise the resolution if you gain awareness. Okay, but how does someone move from awareness to action without falling into therapy speak? The advice is basically, don't aim for perfect sanity. Aim for spotting flags and apologizing quickly. If you're completely sane, run away. That's dark and funny. But be mildly complicated as a dating filter? I can get behind that. It flips the modern relationship myth. We don't accept everything. We keep improving together. Plato love as a classroom. Generosity and kindness while becoming better. That's dangerously wholesome. Yet some people hate the improvement vibe because it sounds like evaluation. The trick is conflict resolution skill, not moral scoring. And they connect it back to modern romanticism. Love without words creates sulking disasters. Romanticism. We didn't need to speak. Reality. We needed to speak badly. Before we spiral, what about the modern paradox part? Happiness versus suffering while we progress. The argument is that losing religion removes a kind of scale narrative. You're part of a bigger story. I'm not sure religion disappearing automatically increases suffering, but I get the psychological angle. And they mention acceptance of being minuscule in the cosmos as calm therapy, basically. Go touch ancient rocks as mental health treatment. Sure, why not? The stronger link they make is meritocracy and individual responsibility creating shame at failure. The language shift from unfortunate to loser is such a sharp cultural clue. When luck becomes taboo, you start blaming your soul instead of your circumstances. And then in extremes, people can feel there is no outside explanation, only, it's me. That's where the suicide conversation comes in. Shame plus responsibility equals danger. It's heavy, but I think the thread connects back to relationships. We're interpreting each other with scripts. So whether it's love, sleep, sex, or despair, the mechanism is unprocessed emotion plus false narratives. And the solution repeatedly is introspection, communication, and compassionate self-awareness. Okay, I'm convinced enough to be slightly annoyed that my brain was never processing properly. Next time I can't sleep, I'm not scrolling. I'm bargaining with my 3 a.m. thoughts. All right, we'll take a breather, because episode 2 is going to get even more practical. If you're listening and thinking, yes, that's me, you're not alone. Now let's carry that into the next episode. Coming up, how to actually build a healthier relationship feedback loop without falling back into sulking or perfection traps. I keep coming back to this. Unprocessed emotion is basically the villain, right? And it's wild that it shows up everywhere. Love, sleep, even sex. Like your nervous system is running group projects with zero communication. So the brain does 70,000 thoughts and we just ignore most of them? And then they come back at 3 a.m. wearing a trench coat. When insomnia hits, you're saying it's revenge for thought avoidance? But do people really avoid thoughts on purpose all day? I mean, I avoid thoughts by doom scrolling like it's a sport. Still, the framing is clean. Emotion wants processing, not suppression. And then relationships become this emotional database with missing entries. That's why anger shows up in bedrooms, not because bodies are broken. Apparently, my libido is just a mood barometer for unresolved resentment. Micro-incidences of disappointment sounds like corporate language for heartbreak. Because it's never one huge betrayal, it's tiny misses accumulating like interest. So the solution isn't candles, it's like dinner table emotional accounting. You ask each other, what annoyed you specifically today or this week? That sounds emotionally dangerous, though, like opening a wound on purpose. But maybe the wound festers when you refuse to say what it is. The point is not accusation, it's discharge before it calcifies into contempt. And contempt is the silent killer, because it freezes desire completely. I like the idea that adults still have childish triggers. Triggered by tiny things is such a relief because it means I'm not insane. I'm just running an old emotional script with new paperwork. Love stories trained us to expect mind reading, then we get mad when humans fail. The sulking mechanism is hilarious and brutal at the same time. You're describing romantic expectations as a recipe for silence and offense. Like, I'm upset, but I won't tell you because true love should decode me. Exactly. Mind-reading fantasies create the whole catastrophe of, please, darling, just tell me. And the worst part is, you're both waiting for the other person to do emotional work. So instead, we should use words, even if it's unromantic. But where's the line between honesty and oversharing? That editing idea matters. Love isn't showing the rawest version of everything daily. Because we have ambivalence, doubts, unfaithful thoughts, yet we can be responsible with them. Here's my entire intrusive thought inventory is not intimacy. Editing is basically compassion with boundaries, not deception with malice. It's like, I won't poison dinner with my inner weather report. And the broader theme is love as a skill, not just a feeling. Plato as love as a classroom. That's such a better metaphor. But modern romance sells the opposite. Destiny, soulmate, silent connection. We didn't need to speak is basically a compliance form for future sulking. The dangerous part is when we treat feelings as proof, not data. So the one soulmate belief becomes rage and disappointment when reality doesn't cooperate. Because you start believing love requires perfect alignment, not mutual skill building. That connects to sleep again, too. When you refuse to process, the system processes you. And when you refuse to communicate, the relationship processes you through distance, coldness, shutdown. What scares me is how automatic all of this is. You don't even notice you're doing it. That's why self-awareness is the lever, not willpower. Like those sentence completion tests, I am. And suddenly you see the hidden theme. My hidden theme would probably be, I am extremely fine with extra stress notes. Therapy works because it exposes your pattern in a safe room, like a petri dish. I know you hate me, said to a professional, is such a plot twist. And then you realize the conviction was learned, not discovered in adulthood. That gives hope, though, because if it was learned, it can be updated. Which leads to the question, how do we stop repeating the cycle? The answer sounds simple. Notice the pattern, apologize quickly, and keep progressing. Quick apology is easy to say, hard to do when ego is on fire. Ego is just emotion wearing formal shoes. Still, the alternative is pride plus silence, which breeds resentment and then intimacy dies. I also like the dating filter idea. Ask, how are you annoyed? If you're completely sane, run away is diabolical but honestly fair. No one's easy to live with, except the person who admits it without blaming you. That's what you called safer, self-awareness plus modesty. And it reframes love, not accepting everything but working on yourself together. Accept me for who I am sounds good until it becomes permission to stagnate. Progress in love means you're both works in progress, not finished products. Okay, but the episode also goes super dark with modern paradoxes and suicide rates. That section felt like the same logic stretched, individual responsibility without supportive narratives. The meritocracy idea basically turns chance into personal failure in people's minds. So when life is bad, your brain goes, you did something wrong, and calls it truth. It's a harsh world when luck is removed from the story. Religion used to reduce expectations by placing you in a bigger narrative. Maybe that helped. But is the answer religion or just humility and perspective? Either way, the core is anti-perfection. Scale your importance down, soften responsibility, reconnect. And that circles back to relationships. Friendship needs vulnerability, not invulnerability. Successful people struggle to make friends because admitting helplessness is hard. We're all broken as a starting point is weirdly stabilizing. Honestly, it's comforting that everyone has flaws. Even the confident people are just better at hiding panics. So the episode leaves us with 3 tools: introspection, communication, and compassionate self-awareness. Plus, process emotions before they metabolize into anxiety, insomnia, and bedroom shutdown. I'm still mad my brain didn't come with a pause and reflect button. But that means we can build one deliberately starting tonight. All right, let's wrap this one because episode 2 is going to get even more practical. We'll talk about building a healthier relationship feedback loop without falling into sulking or perfection traps. Next episode, how to spot the pattern early and fix it before it turns into contempt or cold silence. I love how you frame emotions like they're filing complaints internally. Like if you ignore them all day, they show up at 3 a.m. That insomnia revenge line is insane, in a good way. But I want to test it. What if someone isn't avoiding thoughts? Do you still say the problem is unprocessed emotion or just biology? Because I know people who do everything right and still can't sleep. You're basically saying the mind is a courtroom with unpaid tickets. I get it, though, because anxiety does feel like worry without a label. So for anxiety, you'd ask, what's the cause, not just the symptom? Yes, like depression is sadness that never learned to explain itself. That metaphor hits because I've met sadness that's just stuck. And then the body talks too, right? Back, shoulders, stomach. But people will hear it's emotions and go, great, now it's my fault. Is there a way you keep it compassionate, not blaming? I'm asking because shame already makes people spiral at night. And you also talked about trauma as events we couldn't process. That part about a 5-year-old bereavement. No context, no language. Which is basically the feelings get stored and the system later panics. Okay, but I'm going to connect it to love because you did that too. You're saying romantic love is confused because we treat it like an emotion, not a skill. I agree, but people will still say chemistry is real. Sure, chemistry is real, but you're arguing it rides on childhood tracks. Not free to love just anyone is such a brutal sentence, though. So when someone feels instantly connected, that might be familiarity more than destiny? The soulmate supermarket checkout line theory needs fact-checking. And then sulking appears like this romantic autoimmune disorder. Because you think your partner should mind-read your wounded soul. That's the key. No one's actually an alien capacity machine. I want to sharpen this. What's the practical antidote to sulking? You said, ask, have I told them this? Before you punish them silently. And then you do the unromantic thing, use words. But words can also become weaponized, you know that. Like honesty can turn into dumping your entire psyche on them. So you're arguing for editing, truth with care, not total exposure. Editing is basically foreplay for communication. Where do you draw the line between editing and avoidance? Because a lot of people fear conflict, so they hide behind softness. And conflict avoidance eventually becomes contempt, which kills sex and joy. That's why I love the link you made to bedroom issues. Anger is the hidden blocker. The stat you mentioned, 26% having sex less than 10 times a year, people will argue about data. Sure, but the bigger point is sexless is often a relationship emotion problem. You also called it micro-incidences of disappointment getting stored. Like someone didn't laugh, didn't call, didn't give. Then you store it like petty Bitcoin. So the practical fix was dinner table debriefing. Basically, how have we annoyed each other? That's such a power move because it turns vague resentment into specific repair. But will people really say it without sounding ridiculous? You answered that by saying shame is the enemy, and kids get upset over tiny stuff. Adults still get upset over tiny buttons, we just pretend we don't. So it's permission to be human, not permission to be careless. I'm also thinking about your religion disappeared paradox. You're basically saying modern life makes us feel important and tiny at the same time. And perfection becomes the metric, so any imperfection feels like failure. Which is hilarious because we're not built to be polished sculptures. Then you brought suicide rates into it, suffering amidst progress. That section felt heavy, but the logic was clear. Individualism increases responsibility shame loops. People will still ask, isn't suicide multi-causal and not just ideology? Of course it is, but your point is about how people interpret their suffering. And interpretation is what determines whether pain becomes my fault or this is complex. That ties back to love, too. Romanticism makes people treat mismatch as existential failure. Like, if you don't feel it wordlessly, you must be wrong. Which is why you keep returning to skill. Conflict resolution, repair, apology. Prompt apology is underrated, like emotional maintenance, not emotional surrender. And you said the most safe partners are aware they're not easy to live with. Nobody's easy to live with. Anyone who says they are is a red flag with good PR. So the goal becomes self-awareness, willingness to edit, and continuous progress. I'll be honest, this makes love feel less magical and more workable. And somehow workable sounds way hotter than mysterious destiny. All right, I'm convinced. Now I just need my brain to stop filing complaints at 3 a.m. Next episode, we'll get even more practical about spotting patterns early before they harden into contempt. Deal? Cool. Go gently with your emotions tonight, and we'll see you soon. Episode 2. How to recognize the cycle in real time and intervene before silence turns permanent. Okay, wait, you're saying depression, anxiety are basically unprocessed emotions, right? That the body keeps the score vibe, only you're framing it as emotional paperwork. Emotional paperwork is the funniest way to describe therapy, honestly. But it also explains why the mind punishes you later, like sleep becomes the courtroom. The insomnia take, revenge for thoughts you pretended you didn't have, that's brutal. So when you wake up at 3 a.m., it's not randomness, it's deferred processing? My brain, deferred processing more like fun at my expense. The most annoying part is we spend the day avoiding exactly what we need to feel. And then night shift starts and suddenly everything is urgent. I love the idea of a semi-dark room and just asking, what's coming up? But practically, what if you sit there and nothing comes? Like, do you just force feelings until they show up? That sounds unhealthy too. Not force, invite because you're outward-facing all day, right? Still feels like I'm training a cat to do introspection. Okay, but the relationships part. Sulking is the same mechanism, isn't it? You don't say what's wrong, you expect mind reading, then resentment grows teeth. The bathroom door scene is uncomfortably accurate. I've lived that movie. But where do you draw the line between honesty and editing for love? Because editing can also become a fancy word for withholding truths. Like I'm editing the trauma sounds very therapist-y and also very convenient. True, but the claim is not total silence, it's selective disclosure with kindness. So what's the compass? How do you know when it's love versus protection? Maybe ask, does this information help repair or just satisfy my need to unload? Oof, that one hits, because unloading can feel virtuous while staying self-centered. You're basically saying, don't confess like a performance art piece. And then conflict resolution becomes the real romantic skill nobody teaches. Is that why relationships improve when communication gets less poetic and more tactical? Tactical romance. I would date that slogan. Now the big pivot, sex getting harder over time, anger as the culprit. Okay, but I've seen couples with 0 fights and still low sex. So is anger always the answer? What if the anger is just invisible, like micro-disappointments that never get named? That seems plausible, because contempt is often built from small things you shouldn't care about. Contempt, the quiet subscription service. The dinner exercise, asking how we annoyed each other, that's surprisingly adult. Also terrifying, like going to a restaurant for feedback on your personality. But would it work if one person turns it into a courtroom cross-exam? Then you don't have dinner, you have deposition with vegetables. So the frame matters, not you did wrong, but here's the irritation I carried. And that loops back to the 70,000 thoughts thing. Most of ours aren't processed, just parked. Parked emotions turn into behaviors. Night becomes a spotlight. The bedroom becomes a battlefield. I'm still stuck on the single biggest cause of death for men under 45 is suicide stat you mentioned earlier. It makes the whole modern paradox argument feel less abstract and more urgent. But I worry when people hear modern, they start blaming society like it's a villain movie. Yeah, but it's also about psychological framing. Luck versus responsibility, fate versus merit. Unfortunate to loser is such a nasty linguistic evolution. Words are weapons, man. They train your conscience for you. The point is, if everything is your fault, then suffering becomes shame instead of signal. And shame is the emotion we never process, because it feels like a life sentence. That connects to love, too, doesn't it? Like soulmate scripts turn disappointment into identity attacks. They didn't text back, therefore I'm unlovable. Romanticism's dark sequel. Romanticism says love is instinct. Psychology says love is a skill plus self-knowledge. Love as a classroom is such a vibe because it removes the fate excuse. But people hate classrooms. They want sparks, not homework. Honestly, romance markets itself as no effort, but the brain still needs maintenance. So maybe the real paradox is we have more comfort, yet we're less equipped to handle inner discomfort. Progress without processing is just more time to spiral. And religions decline, using the word disappearance as a provider of perspective and humility. But would you say it's about religion specifically or the function it served, like belonging to something larger? Because secular people can still be humble and grounded. True, but the argument is that many modern systems don't train humility, they train performance. Performance culture plus perfectionism equals I'm failing the ideal 24/7. That's the most exhausting boss I've ever worked for, the perfect version of me. So what do you do with a partner who's chasing perfection too? You lower expectations and raise clarity, because perfect love is a myth, workable love is a practice. Workable love sounds like a corporate initiative, but I'll take it. Last question before we wrap. How do I know my unprocessed thought is showing up as contempt? If you can't name what you're upset about, but you're suddenly allergic to affection, probably contempt. And the fix is to make it speak earlier, at dinner, in daylight, with words. I'm genuinely excited for what we do next, because this is all practical but still deep. All right, that's it for episode 1. Go easy on yourself tonight and don't punish your partner for your silence. Episode 2 is coming with how to spot the cycle in real time, before silence turns permanent. Okay, but I want the how right now. What do I do tonight? Sit semi-dark, ask, what's coming up inside me? Semi-dark sounds like the main character lighting cue. It's less cinematic, more honest. What happened today in me? And if nothing feels wrong, do I just wait for insomnia? You don't wait. You listen for the unprocessed thoughts fragmenting. Fragmenting as in, like my brain keeps the receipts but not the story? Exactly. At 3 a.m. it does the filing system for you. Insomnia is emotional revenge. That's wild. It's your emotional conscience insisting on being heard. So the goal is to hear them before they speak loudly? Yes. Have the deeper conversation with yourself before you enter sleep. I already hate talking to myself, so this is a loophole. Great, now hate it productively. How does that connect to relationships, though, beyond be mindful? Unprocessed emotions leak into conflict, sex drive, and sulking. Wait, sex drive is basically an emotion digest issue? Often, yes. Stored anger kills desire more than lack of candles. Candles are the cheapest placebo on earth. The mind isn't obvious to itself, so you feel nothing, but you're furious. Furious in silence, like micro-disappointments turning into contempt? Contempt loves vagueness. It thrives when you refuse to name things. So we should resolve anger at dinner, not in the bedroom? Dinner is underrated conflict resolution. Ask how you annoyed each other. That sounds like therapy with carbs. Exactly. And it's we're human, not you're evil. But what if the things are ridiculous, like you didn't laugh? Ridiculous to adults, not ridiculous to the child part still inside. That's such a clean way to remove shame from it. Shame is the villain's manager. It hires contempt and blocks truth. Okay, but I'm going to push back. Doesn't saying the truth damage the relationship? Total honesty is utopian and kind of dangerous. So you're saying edit yourself, love-compatible editing? Not deception, selective sharing so you don't dump every ambivalence at once. That makes communication sound less like confession roulette. Yes, words are boring, but they prevent the catastrophic sulk outbreak. Catastrophic sulk outbreak should be a warning label on romance. Sulking starts when you believe your partner can read your wounded soul, and then you punish them for being human. Yep, you withhold words, then act offended about the absence of telepathy. I've definitely been the bathroom door knocker in my head. Then the practice is simple. Ask, have I told them this? That's the fastest unprocessed thought detector I've heard. If I can't name my upset, but I'm allergic to affection, what exactly is it? Likely contempt. Contempt masks anger and protects your pride. Pride as a sleep saboteur. That's depressing. Yeah, but at least it's observable, not mystic. You also mentioned childhood patterns. Repeat what you don't understand. The mind uses childhood defenses that once made sense, then later caused damage. Like being a clown as a genius survival strategy, then adulthood thinks you're plastic. How do people increase awareness of their cycle without just self-judging? Small levers help, like sentence completion tests. Weird truths bubble up. I am ... sounds harmless until your soul tattles. Therapy does it too, like a petri dish where your projection appears clearly. Petri dish is unsettling, but I get it. You notice, then you don't have to repeat the defense forever. That's the hope part. Self-awareness plus progress is workable love. And progress means learning conflict resolution, not mystery soulmate vibes. Soulmate vibes are romantic, but also a recipe for sulking. So what about happiness? Are we aiming wrong with this must-be-happy obsession? Modern paradox. Progress and plenty, yet more suffering and loneliness. Even institutions of meaning disappearing can destabilize the psyche. Religion used to anchor time and reduce the pressure of perfection. So acceptance of being small is actually therapeutic? Graceful smallness is calm. Scale down your ego, up your harmony. Ego scaling, the only subscription I'd pay for. And perfectionism makes day-to-day life hard because you become your own judge. Which brings us back to unprocessed thoughts, your inner courtroom. Exactly, process the fragments so they don't testify at 3 a.m. All right, I'm buying into this. Love is a skill, sleep is feedback, thoughts are data. Don't make it sound like a dashboard, though. It'll ruin the romance. Too late, my brain is already running analytics. One last question. What's the smallest action that changes everything this week? Evening check-in. What am I angry with, excited by, and what really happened? And for the relationship, talk before it becomes sulking, right? Yes, use words early, apologize quickly, and keep editing in love. I can do early words and quick apologies. That's my kind of magic. All right, that's episode 1. Go easy on yourself tonight, be kind tomorrow, and speak earlier. Episode 2 is coming with how to spot the cycle in real time, before silence turns permanent. Okay. The sleep thing is making my brain go, wait, 3 a.m., revenge? So the thoughts you didn't process all day, they clock in at 3 a.m., annoying. That's actually hilarious in a terrifying way, like your mind has shift timings. But it tracks. If feelings don't get digested, they come out as noise. Still, I'm going to challenge the 70,000 thoughts number just slightly, because my thoughts feel more like 700,000 on bad caffeine days. Fair, but the vibe is right. Fragmentary stuff, unhandled, piles up. And you're saying anxiety is worry without a cause label attached. Depression is sadness that hasn't understood itself, like it never got a debrief. Debriefing sadness sounds like corporate training, but emotionally accurate. I love the body prompt, too. If your back could speak, what would it say? Because sometimes the body is the only honest narrator we trust. Do you think people avoid that check-in because it feels too vulnerable? Yeah, like they'll rather fix a pillow than face the actual fear behind it. Pillows are the gateway drug to denial, apparently. Then relationships become the second stage of the same problem, unprocessed emotion. The sulking story is wild. You think your partner should read you mindlessly. We didn't even need to speak is basically a recipe for silent resentment. The romantic sentence is secretly a sabotage manual. So when someone sulks, it's not just anger, it's demand plus imagination. Demand, understand me. Imagination. You can't fail because true love means it. But also, are we expecting too much honesty from people in the moment? Or maybe we're expecting honesty from them while refusing to be uncomfortable ourselves. That editing in love part made sense, like not dumping your entire psyche daily. Where's the line between editing and emotional omission, though? Because some people use editing to hide cruelty under a velvet blanket. Velvet cruelty, the most expensive form of avoidance. I think the healthier version is reveal the useful truth, not every raw thought. Like be honest about what you're feeling, without turning it into a forensic trial. And it sounds like you're saying words early prevents the bedroom from becoming a battlefield. The sex statistics, less than 10 times a year and 8% none at all, is brutal. But the explanation is even more brutal. Anger blocks desire quietly, then slowly wins. Micro-disappointments stack up. Didn't call, didn't laugh, didn't show generosity. Sounds like petty grievances with a long-term contract. So the fix isn't candles, it's conflict resolution and draining frustration. Dinner table therapy is such a funny phrase, but it's also genius. Ask each other how you annoyed one another, then own it like adults. I can already hear people saying, but that sounds ridiculous. Sure, it sounds ridiculous to the adult brain, but the inner child is literally listening. Adults get upset about tiny things too, they just call it being rational. Is that why contempt feels so permanent, because you never named the smaller hurt? Exactly. Contempt is what happens when you stop processing the sadness and start scoring points. And that's where childhood patterns sneak in. Love repeats what we don't understand. We say I attract my type, but it's more like I reenact my childhood plot. The tracks laid down metaphor is scary because it makes it sound automatic. But the good news is awareness is a lever, not a life sentence. Sentence completion tests, like life is forcing hidden beliefs to bubble up. I'd write life is probably an audit, watch me. Same, but then you catch the pattern and suddenly you're not surprised by yourself. Therapy works like a petri dish, same behavior, new visibility. And sometimes you see you're trying to look after people to undo old guilt, which means your partner might be living next to a role you built at 5. Hi, love, I'm caretaker you now. That's not romance, that's a shift change. Then the growth step is self-awareness, prompt apologies, and real progress. Not perfection, just knowing where you get unsafe and warning before harm. How you mad as a dating question is so blunt it might actually save people. If you're completely sane, run away, is the funniest safety guideline. But doesn't that risk attracting people who perform awareness? Yeah, but you can still watch consistency over time. Talk is cheap. Repair matters. Repair is love being a skill, like the Plato classroom idea. Love as a classroom is romanticism's harshest correction. Still, I like the core: generosity, kindness, and helping each other grow. And that reconnects to the bigger paradox. Happiness becomes a pressure, not a process. Modern life offers plenty, yet suffering rises, especially when responsibility feels total. Meritocracy logic is a psychological trap. If it's all on you, failure becomes shame. And shame is a sleep assassin, by the way. So religion disappearing is framed as losing a narrative that kept the present from feeling tyrannical. I get the idea. Scale your ego down and calm follows more naturally. Feeling small in a good way, like nature does it instantly, versus made small by someone. That's the meta-theme then. Process, edit, scale down, communicate early. It's like one therapy toolkit wearing different outfits across sleep and sex. All right, I'm going to do the evening check-in tonight and see if my brain stops negotiating. Tomorrow I'm also going to say the thing earlier, before it becomes a bathroom door ceremony. If it goes bad, at least I'll be honest instead of sulking like a poet. Thanks for hanging out with us. Go easy on yourself tonight. Be kind tomorrow. Episode 2 is coming with how to spot your cycle in real time before silence turns permanent.